The first sound Gerald Blackwell heard that morning was the crunch of dead leaves beneath his shoes, sharp and final, like the breaking of something that could never be repaired. Every Sunday began this way, the same iron gates, the same winding path, the same cold reminder that life, no matter how powerful or wealthy you became, could still take everything that mattered most in a single moment. Gerald had learned that lesson 5 years ago, and it had never loosened its grip on his chest. At 68, Gerald Blackwell was a man the world admired, a billionaire whose name sat comfortably on financial magazines and business panels, a self-made titan whose decisions shaped markets and fortunes. But here, inside Oakwood Cemetery, none of that mattered. The polished shoes, the tailored black coat, the silver hair carefully combed back, they were meaningless. Here, he was just a father walking toward his son's grave. Matthew Blackwell, 32 years old when the rain-slicked road and a drunk driver ended his life. The boy Gerald had raised alone after cancer stole his wife when Matthew was only 10. Father and son against the world. Fishing trips, late-night talks, shared grief that bound them together tighter than blood ever could. Matthew had been his future, his pride, his reason. And then he was gone. Gerald stopped a few steps short of the grave. Someone was already there. 2 small figures knelt in front of the headstone, their backs to him. Little girls, twins. They couldn't have been more than 7 or 8. One wore a red coat, the other yellow. Bright splashes of color against the gray stone and fallen leaves. They held hands, their heads bowed with a seriousness that didn't belong to children so young. Gerald felt confusion ripple through his grief. Matthew had no children, no siblings, no nieces. For a moment, Gerald considered turning back, giving them privacy. But something rooted him in place. A strange pull, a quiet sense that this moment mattered. He stepped closer, carefully, as if afraid the scene might shatter if he moved too fast. Then he heard their voices. Soft, synchronized, practiced. They were thanking someone. Thanking Matthew. Thank you for saving us. Thank you for giving us a chance to live. We wish we could have met you. We wish we could tell you how grateful we are. Please watch over our mama. She misses you. The words hit Gerald like a physical blow. His breath caught, sharp and painful. Saving us, giving us a chance to live. His vision blurred, and for a moment the cemetery tilted beneath his feet. Matthew had saved no one. Matthew had died. Hadn't he? The girls sensed him then, turning together, their dark eyes calm and solemn, not afraid, curious, as if they'd been expecting him. One of them asked politely if he was visiting someone. Gerald tried to answer, but his voice came out rough, frayed by years of unshed grief. He told them the truth, that this was his son's grave, that Matthew Blackwell was his child. The reaction was instant and devastating. The girls broke apart, their small hands slipping free as they dissolved into sobs that shook their entire bodies. Not quiet crying, not polite tears. This was grief pouring out of children who understood far too much for their age. Gerald dropped to his knees without thinking, his expensive coat soaking into the damp earth. He begged them to stop crying, apologized though he didn't know what he'd done wrong. And then the truth spilled out. Matthew had given them his heart, his liver. When he died, pieces of him had gone on living inside them. The world didn't tilt this time. It shattered. Gerald had signed the donor papers in a hospital hallway, numb and hollow, doing what he knew Matthew would have wanted, while his own heart screamed in protest. He'd never asked who received the organs, never wanted to know. Knowing felt like reopening a wound that refused to heal. But here they were, alive, breathing, looking up at him with his son's heart beating steadily inside one of them. When their mother arrived, a tired woman in worn scrubs, with eyes that carried years of fear and hope, the last piece fell into place. Elena Rodriguez, a nurse, a single mother, a woman who had prayed for a miracle she felt guilty asking for. Matthew had been that miracle. They sat together that morning, the past unfolding like a story that had been waiting to be told. Premature twins, congenital defects, failing organs. A countdown measured in weeks, then a call in the night. A 1-in-a-million match. One donor, 2 lives saved. Matthew. Gerald cried until he thought there was nothing left inside him. And then he cried some more. But for the first time in 5 years, his tears weren't only pain. There was something else mixed in. Relief, gratitude, awe. His son hadn't just died. His son had given life. From that day forward, everything changed. At first, it was small things. Coffee together after cemetery visits. Conversations on park benches while the twins laughed nearby. Stories exchanged carefully, like fragile glass. Gerald told Elena about Matthew, about his music, his terrible jokes, his stubborn kindness. Elena told Gerald about sleepless nights in hospital rooms, about the fear of watching her daughters fade away, about the guilt of surviving because someone else didn't. The twins listened wide-eyed, absorbing every detail of the man who had unknowingly become part of them. Gerald found himself laughing again. Not often, not easily, but genuinely. The sound surprised him every time it escaped his throat. He noticed things he couldn't ignore: Elena's exhaustion, the strain behind her smiles, the way she stretched every dollar until it nearly broke. So he helped, quietly. A better car that appeared through coincidence. Medical bills that vanished. An apartment that somehow became affordable. He never framed it as charity, only as gratitude. But the greatest gift he gave was himself. He showed up. School plays, birthdays, doctor appointments, museum trips, chess games at the kitchen table. Slowly, naturally, the twins began calling him Grandpa. The first time they said it, Gerald had to excuse himself to another room and steady his breathing. He had thought that part of his life was over. He had been wrong. 6 months after that first meeting, the idea came to him fully formed, as if Matthew himself had placed it there. A foundation. Support for families facing pediatric transplants. Covering the costs insurance never did. Giving parents room to breathe while fighting for their children's lives. Elena ran it. Gerald funded it. Together, they turned grief into something useful, something alive. Families came from everywhere. Parents on the edge of breaking. Children clinging to hope. Donor families searching for meaning in loss. In the garden behind the foundation building, trees were planted. Names were etched. Stories were shared. Healing happened quietly, persistently. the way real healing always does. The twins grew strong. Sophia discovered music, her fingers finding melodies on Matthew's old guitar as if guided by memory. Isabella gravitated towards science and medicine, asking questions far beyond her years, already dreaming of becoming a surgeon who could save lives the way hers had been saved. 5 years after the cemetery meeting, they gathered again at Matthew's grave. But this time, they weren't alone. Dozens of families stood together, connected by threads of loss and gratitude. The twins sang a song they'd written themselves, voices steady and brave, singing about gifts that outlast death and love that refuses to end. Gerald listened with tears streaming freely down his face, his heart full in a way he'd once believed impossible. Matthew was gone. But Matthew was everywhere. That night, Gerald wrote in his journal, as he did every evening. He wrote about grief and purpose, about how tragedy had not destroyed him, but reshaped him, about how love didn't disappear, it transformed. Across town, Sophia lay in bed, her hand resting over her heart, feeling its steady rhythm. Matthew's heart, carrying life forward, carrying love into tomorrow. And in that quiet moment, the truth settled gently over everything. Some endings are not endings at all. They are beginnings we don't recognize until it's too late to call them anything else. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that even in the darkest moments, life can still grow something beautiful, then take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this exist to remind us that hope is never gone. It's just waiting to be found.